I rode a skateboard into a wall time and time again, trying to break my own arm so I didn't have to go to school. And I just say that to say I discovered alcohol really soon after that. So I was looking for a way to not feel these things that were that painful.
Food Addiction is a podcast which explores the disease of food addiction and presents the solution. We interview professionals and counselors who specialize in the disease of food addiction, and we interview individuals who have successfully recovered from food addiction and discuss how they did it. Esther Helga Goodman-Stotier was motivated to change careers after she recovered from food addiction by opening a food addiction treatment center and the InFact School, the world's first and only sugar and food addiction counseling training, which offers a recognized certification. Check out the website for more information on obtaining this certification, as well as proven recovery programs at infactschool.com. Listen to these episodes as we discuss the problem and the solution around food addiction. This is the podcast, Food Addiction, the Problem and the Solution. I'm Susan Branscombe. I am a recovered food addict and the podcast host. Today, we host Amy B., a food addict in recovery. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Thanks for taking the time to do this. So we usually start out by talking about, how you identify as a food addict in recovery, I understand.
I do.
We usually like to talk about how you used food, your relationship with food, negative consequences from your food use, and talk about your story, just generally speaking. So let me start by sort of your background. How old are you?
I'm fixing to turn 60, as we say in the South. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are fixing to get ready,
Right,
fixing
absolutely.
to turn 60. Yeah.
Fixing to turn 60.
Well, good. Well, I'm 65, so we've been through some life, and we'll get into some stuff here, some stories. So talk about your childhood, where you grew up, what
Sure.
your parents were like, and siblings.
Sure. I'm from the Midwest, and I grew up, I was an only child, lived with adults, right? That's the thing about being an only child. And one of the things that I see now was that food for me was a self-soothe. And it was, I think, easy for grownups to use it as a self-soothe for me, so I didn't get in their way. So when I remember being, say, in second grade, and I was a latchkey kid, would come home, would eat, read, and watch TV at the same time. I was just trying to numb out on every level that I could. So I'm watching, Star Trek reruns, eating saltine crackers, and reading Little House on the Prairie all at once. And that was kind of,
The reading-eating combination was really good, wasn't it?
And TV, yeah. So
and TV,
right.
Yeah.
So I'm attempting to numb out, and I see the in the 12-step rooms we have some literature that's kind of describes really well what people went through. And in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson writes about being restless, irritable, and discontent. And that was me. I had a hate-love relationship with school. I enjoyed books. I wasn't all that interested in other kids because I'm an only child, right? And I'm like, their mores are weird. I don't know why they would do that stuff that they're doing. Restless, irritable, and discontent.
Yeah, I was there, right there with you. Almost sounds like when you were a kid that your parents, since you didn't have siblings, you were an only child, that it almost sounds like food was a bit of a babysitter for them. Sort of.
Well, I don't know that they used it that way. I mean, do you know what I mean? I've heard people say that people kind of shoved food at them. I knew that it was a self-soothe, so I would go self-select it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Were you an overweight child?
I was big boned. It's kind of classically big boned. I I was 5'9". I'm scared to look and see if I'm still 5'9".
Don't
No, I'm
look,
not gonna
because
look, right?
we shrink.
Right.
Let me just say.
I'm still 5'9", let's say. But
Yeah.
I was 5'4" when I was 10, and I weighed 120
Oh,
pounds. And I wore a size 8 women's shoes. So this I had this growth spurt.
yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sounds like you were like me in that you came home from school, and this is what I did. I would get a book, turn the TV on, and I would eat. I would eat fudge, hash browns, whatever, ice cream,
Right.
and that's how I was such an anxious kid, and school was stressful
Mm-hmm.
to me, and so that's how I soothed myself from the anxiety and the fear and the stress. And it sounds like you did the same thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Was there addiction in your family?
Yes. There. I have a parent who self-identifies as an alcoholic, and there's a lot of heavy drinking and the consequences of heavy drinking in my family.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the same thing with on both sides of my family. There was alcoholism, and my dad was an alcoholic. Let's talk about the food and the weight.
Yeah.
You say that you have lost and gained 100 pounds over and over
Yeah.
again, and so you were a volume eater. I think
Yes.
that's safe to assume, right?
Absolutely.
And your trigger foods, sugar and other foods. So talk about the weight and the use of food over your life.
Sure. I had mentioned the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous before, and there's this line in there that says the great obsession of every drinker is to be able to control and enjoy their drinking. And that's true of my eating. You know what I mean? I really wanted to be able to eat without consequences. So
Hmm.
when I was, uh, I think I told you I weighed 120, 125 when I was 10. So I self-identify as fat then, right? And I continued to self-identify as fat. And the thing that's interesting to me in retrospect is if I'm already fat, there's not a top limit. Do you know what I mean? I'm already that thing.
Yeah.
So I had this vague idea when I was in middle school, for instance, that I would like to be not fat, but oh well, it's just not going to happen. And then when I was in high school, I read this book about anorexia, and I thought this would solve all my problems. All I need to
Yeah.
do is not eat. So I went to my mom and I said, "Look, I just read this book about anorexia, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to eat for like 2 weeks." And my mom said, "Okay, great," because she didn't believe me.
Oh.
Right?
Oh. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Try
Yeah.
that.
She's like, "Okay, that's going to be great." I did not eat anything for 2 weeks. I mean,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
So I was drinking water and Diet Pepsi. Okay. Yeah.
Were you getting faint?
Yeah, I was coming home and going to sleep. I
Oh
was coming
yeah.
home at
You don't have any
3:30 and going to
energy.
sleep. I had no energy. But the takeaway from that was I was able to lose 25 pounds in 2 weeks. Right.
Yeah.
So, because I was going to the prom with my
Oh
not
God, I did
with
that.
my not boyfriend, in my in my friend group, in my little gunny sacks dress, right? And so yeah, I thought, well, this is it, man. All I have to do is not eat. Let me just say that this was my one brush with not eating, but I got it because there was this sort of high that came from that.
Yeah, there is a high.
Yeah. So I mean that's kind of why cults will use food deprivation and sleep deprivation, because you can kind of get that euphoria. Um,
Yeah.
but this was an example for me of self will. It's easy to lose weight, and I had this idea in the back of my head that all I'm going to do is I'm going to get to the magic number. I think the magic number was 140. If I weigh 140 pounds, I'm going to be golden. Life is going to be great.
Yeah.
It's all going to be
Yeah.
aces and eights. So yeah, that was not my experience.
Yeah, I did the exact same thing when I was 16, and I lost weight for the prom. I wanted to fit in this sort of like sage green dress. And if you remember back then, everything was fluffy and lace. And we'll talk about Little House on the Prairie. I mean, that's what we look like. Absolutely. It wasn't anything skimpy or revealing. It was like this, and I looked great in that dress. And what I did I think it was 2 weeks before the prom, I ate oranges and nothing else.
100%.
So I was getting the fruit sugar for probably stimulation, but it worked, and I lost 12 pounds, and everybody was saying, "Oh, look at Susie, she looks great. You look great. You look great." Because I was carrying extra weight, and it worked, and I got that high. Which is that sort of like pounding in your head, like the euphoric feeling of restriction. And there are people that are food addicts that aren't like you and I, where we ate volumes and we gained a lot of weight. There are people that are anorexic, are bulimic, that identify as food addicts, and it's their behaviors and how they use food.
Right. I think because at that time, any discourse around eating disorders was located on anorexia and bulimia, kind of alone, right? So I didn't recognize that compulsive overeating was another form of an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's still not even seen as that.
Yeah.
And food addiction is, the science is there that it's like alcohol. Sugar and highly processed foods are like alcohol. They go to the brain. There's a dopamine response, and that the addiction starts. The cravings, we talk about the phenomenon of craving, and then the mental obsession once the craving kicks in. So that is a physical response in terms of food addiction. And then there are the behaviors, and there are addictive behaviors around this. So it can get pretty tricky and complicated.
Absolutely.
But you and I have figured it out, and we have found a solution. So we'll keep going here.
Okay.
So talk about the 100 pound. For me, it was 50 pounds. I'm much shorter than you. I'm only about 5'2". It was 50 pound swings for me. And I was really good at dieting. I found just the right diet. Okay, this liquid thing, or this Atkins or South Beach or Weight Watchers. I did them all.
Right.
And Monday I would start, and I'd do it for 2 months, and I'd lose 40 pounds, or 3 months I'd lose 50 pounds. And I'd get all the compliments, and my clothes, some great clothes fit. And it was kind of like, okay, I found it. I found the thing that works. So talk about that in your 100-pound loss and where you were there, that journey.
Sure. I really did think that there was a finish line. So I'm going to get to whatever the magic number is. And the magic number has gone up, right? When I was in high school, it was 140. And, it's gone up. And I'm glad for that. But it took me until relatively recently to let go of the idea that there was a finish line. For me, the idea of the finish line meant I'm going to get to the magic weight, and then my metabolism will have metamorphosed in some way, metamorphosed in some way. And I will then be able to eat like a normal person, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I should, and I'm not taking into consideration the fact that I've been in a couple of long longitudinal studies of how other people eat, right? I'm in my second marriage.
Yeah.
I'm in my second marriage, and I marry people who have a normal relationship with food. And so what that looks like for them is they can buy the thing, and they can eat a little bit of the thing, and then they put it away and don't think about it for a long time. Right?
I'm married to that guy.
I'm happy for them on a theoretical way, but I really thought that I would be reset. And that was an idea that I had a hard time letting go of, that my whole metabolism was going to reset in some way, or that the obsession was going to stop. I could have a little bit of something.
Me too. And the thing about these commercial weight loss programs is they don't give you what you need to do to maintain your weight. It's not in their business plan, because they want you to gain it and come back to Weight Watchers with your little card with your weight on it. And And for food addicts, diets, if you diet, they can work for a while. But then, we always go back to the food as a solution to stop us from feeling. And the denial, like you were telling yourself the story, like once I get to my goal weight, then my body will have shifted and I'll eat normally like other people.
Right.
And those are the things we tell ourselves, the stories, so that we can continue to eat, right? That's what I did.
Oh, a beautiful dream. Okay. This is, and I think that you and I were talking about this yesterday, this idea of goal-oriented happiness.
Yes, destination happiness. I was going to ask you about that. Talk about that.
When I get married, then life is going to be great. When I get that job, or when I get the promotion, or when my hair gets long. I mean, I've or when I cut my hair, or when the hair color is right. I've had a lot of external ideas of what would have to be in place in order to be happy. And one of the ideas was not only that my metabolism was going to reset magically, and that I was going to be able to have moderate amounts of things I've never been able to have a moderate amount of, right? Like sugar, chocolate, etc. But that if I weighed whatever the magic number is, then my whole life would be great. And I remember I went to see my primary care physician, and that poor bastard, he has seen me gain and lose. Right? And he just pretty much doesn't ask questions anymore. He's just like, kind of, okay, that's an outside issue as far as he seems to be concerned. He's like, okay, it looks good right now, but I mean, it's kind of, he's just not going to ask me any questions about it. And bless his heart, I don't think that his education has provided him with any kind of a grasp on anything that I'm going through, right? So he's
not been trained on addiction.
He's don't ask, don't tell about it. But one time when I went in and had lost a lot of weight, he's like, "Oh yeah, you've lost a lot of weight." Yeah, yep, I have. And I said, "And you know what? The weird thing is, I thought I would be happy, and I'm not." And he's got deer in the headlights. He's like, "Oh my, oh no, this
it's like, we've got pills for that."
Yeah, this strange woman now wants to talk about feelings. I'm way outside.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Their eyes glaze over on some of this stuff. Like, I've talked to my doctor. He's like, "How did you do it? How did you lose 70 pounds? How are you keeping it off? Your body loves it, by the way. My blood work is perfect. I used to have high blood pressure.
Absolutely.
Medicated.
Right.
I used to have diabetes.
Right.
I don't have any of those things anymore."
Yeah.
He's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm in recovery from food addiction." And he's just looking at me like, "Food addiction?"
Yeah.
And the medical community doesn't understand this. They do one little class I've heard on nutrition.
Yeah.
So they don't do preventative stuff.
Right.
They like, okay, you have these symptoms, you're overweight, you've got heart disease, whatever, let's throw a pill at it.
Right.
That's how they're trained.
Right.
So the recovery's not there.
One of my friends works in the area of public health for the state. And I reached out to her the other day to say, I live in a very poor area. I live in an area that has a lot of, if I were to just look around at the general population, there seems to be a great deal of obesity, right? We know the stats about the obesity epidemic in America, right? And the people that I see out and about on a daily basis are supporting that data. So I was just asking her, at the level of public health, are there initiatives that are addressing any of that? I mean, a lot of money has been pumped into, and rightly so, the opioid crises, right? And getting Narcan training and things like that. So I said, is any money going into the obesity epidemic? And she reached out to her coworkers and she said, well, there is like a class that people can take who are getting like food benefits. They could take a nutrition class, like for an hour, to how to get the most nutrition bang. I'm like, wow. I really, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes. I wish that's all it took. Susan, here's what you need to eat. To weigh, 130. Right. But there's a lot more there's a lot more to it in case of food addicts, and not everybody's a food addict.
Right.
The stats say that somewhere between 10 and 20% of people are addicted. I think the numbers are much bigger than that because of the obesity crisis. And the stats say that by the year 2030, that 80%, or let's see, no, it's 60% of people will be obese, not overweight, obese. And I see it in my town. You go out, and I mean, these people are not 25 pounds overweight. They're 100 pounds, 150 pounds, and they can barely walk, and you can't tell me that that's, you can't tell me that there's not some kind of food use that might involve addiction, whether behaviors or
Right.
bodily.
Yeah, I had read recently that for the first time in recent history, life expectancy rates are going down because of this.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That is right. I've looked at those stats as well.
So we're not going to live as long.
So, no. What, well, you and I are going to live a long time.
You and I are. Barring anything unforeseen. Yeah.
I just hope I can afford to live as long as I think I'm going to live. But I've talked to my daughter about that, and we've got a financial arrangement if I go to over 100.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
My dogs are going to take care of me. It's going to be great.
Oh, okay. Good luck there.
Yeah, thanks. We've got it.
My dog's smart. He's not that smart. Give the listeners an idea what kind of trigger foods where you're go-to.
Sure. I'm a lowbrow food addict. Let me just say, to get my groove on, I could go to a gas station. If you drop me off at a movie theater with $50, I'm going to be super happy.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Were you and I talking about Boston baked beans?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Those were my favorite when I was a kid at a movie theater.
Oh, my
those Boston baked beans. I didn't know they still made them.
They do. I'm happy to report, or they did, as within the last 10 years, I have purchased them and eaten them.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I want the kind of food that you can get at a place like the dollar store.
Yes.
Right. I want the big box of candy. I want the big bag of off-brand Cheetos.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Now you're talking. With a big thing of Mountain Dew, sugar-filled Mountain Dew. That was my thing, too. Cheez-Its and Mountain Dew, yes.
Yes, absolutely. So I still have a hard time going to movie theaters, by the way, just because it's hard for me to be in a dark space with all those smells and all that kind of stimulation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard for me too. I, sometimes still at weddings, I have issues because everybody's happy and eating and drinking, and so there are trigger places, that's for sure.
Right.
But we addicts, and I've done this with food. We put something in our mouths, we eat, we drink. To make our feelings go away.
Absolutely.
And we were talking about this yesterday, that I knew that I could count on food, and we'll talk about alcohol. I could count on food to help me, whether it was the crunch or it was Kit Kat bars or cheese and crackers. When we put something in our mouths, the sadness, the fear, anger can go away for a while.
Right.
And we numb out. And many of us addicts are very smart. We are intellectual people, not to brag or go to ego, but many of us are pretty damn smart. Okay. And I know you are. I am smart. But
just ask us.
Yeah, just ask us. But we're not necessarily into our hearts, right? We don't go there easily. And I've heard in 12-step recovery that my best thinking got me here.
Absolutely.
So we spend a lot of time in our heads, and we're not as comfortable spending time in our hearts and with our emotions.
Right.
So talk about using food and in terms of emotional regulation.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think has been used frequently in addiction journeys is for people to chart their progress, right? What was going on at the time that you were bottoming out on whatever the thing is. And so if I look back on, and I had told you yesterday, I quit drinking 25 years ago, and I immediately lost a lot of weight because I was eating and drinking with both hands. And so if you don't drink a 12-pack of beer a day, turns out you can lose some weight. Who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah.
So if I chart that in terms of why do I then gain the weight back, I went through some life crises, right? So the time that I gained the weight, I had gotten pregnant and had a miscarriage, and we were doing IVF stuff, and I just couldn't get pregnant. And I don't have any tools naturally, right? I've used food and booze my whole life in order to get through stuff. And I was in 12-step rooms where they were talking about tools. I could probably talk to you about those tools, but that doesn't necessarily mean I was using them. So I don't have anything to do. So I went back into the food. Reading is one of my drugs of choice, anything that's going to get me out of my head. And I remember after having a miscarriage, just rereading this book again and again, because it was getting me to some emotional place in my head. It was just a light kind of beach read, but I was reading it again and again and eating, anything to get out of those feelings. Anything to get out of those feelings. Okay, work through that, do whatever. Lose weight again, and then my first marriage was in crisis. Again, I don't have any tools, and so I end up gaining the weight. So it was always, and I always had it in the back of my mind that for right now, the food is holding this gig together. I know it's a bad idea, and I could tell you, oh yes, you're right, it's a bad idea. But for right now, this is what's doing it. And at the end of the quarter, when the semester ends, after Christmas, then I'm going to be able to really hunker down and fix this thing.
Yeah.
But until then, we're just going to have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And, that's just not a sustainable model. I remember hearing people talk about how they finished their PhD dissertation, and they were talking about doing things like, well, I just had to write 20 minutes at a time whenever I could. I'm like, that's crazy. What you do is you just clear out the weekend, and that's all you do for the weekend.
Yeah, hyper focus.
Right. So, I have these, but then that wasn't sustainable. The weekend would come and I'd be tired, and I just have to, I need to really rearrange my my sock closet. I can't work on my dissertation right now. Was those socks looking like that? Are you kidding?
Right.
So I just had all of these. I didn't have coping skills. I didn't have skills for getting through stuff. I did not have a belief system. I didn't believe in anything necessarily. So self-will, I'm in charge of this ship.
Yeah.
We're all in trouble.
And it's going well, isn't it?
We need a grown-up to show up ASAP.
So I think I hear what you're saying with, you experienced divorce, you experienced miscarriage.
Yeah.
You were working on a degree, and there's a lot of stress involved there. And you're like me, it's kind of like all or nothing.
Right.
It's like my husband said, why can't you just moderate? I don't know why I can't just moderate, but that's not the way we do things, right? It's all or nothing, just like, okay, I'm going to spend the weekend studying this 20 minutes at a time thing. No way.
Right.
So, yeah. So the emotional escape, though, it sounds like there was sadness there. There was maybe, I don't know, a sense of failure with the loss of the marriage and what happened, and the emotion there that you weren't feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this idea that I had that I believe, I've heard it said that when we pick up the substance, we stop growing emotionally, whatever the substance is. Okay, so I pick up food before I go to kindergarten, right? And I'm not going to say that that's my emotional maturity stopped right then.
I don't think so.
I think I
give you a little more credit than that.
I think so. However, it just didn't. I had an idea that if I experience pain, it's going to kill me.
Yeah. Emotional pain. Pain people think physical pain, right. But any kind of sadness or anything coming in, we weren't equipped to handle it, right?
And I think I told you the story about my mom and I had gone to a movie, and I talked to my grandma afterwards, and my grandma said, "Oh, how was the movie?" And I said to my grandma, "Oh, it was a tearjerker." And my grandma goes, "Oh no."
We don't cry.
no,
You don't want to cry at a movie.
Absolutely
No.
not. I came from people who didn't necessarily have bandwidth for a great deal of emotional nuance.
Yeah.
Who they themselves had been told, we don't cry, we just show up and do this.
Right.
And everybody was doing the best that they could, and they passed what they had been taught along. And one of the things is, we don't cry, we don't ask for help, just stay in your lane.
That's what I grew up with, which I think my parents or their parents, whatever, grew up in the Depression era. And
Right.
these are immigrants, that came to this country, turn of the century or in the 70s. And they were taught you survive by working the land and having animals that you can slaughter for food. You have a garden and you have to work all day long in order to survive.
Absolutely.
And that's what they came from. And they were taught, don't stop to feel anything. That's what I think.
Here's the thing. If I'm chopping my own wood, right, I don't necessarily have bandwidth to go into a deep dive of what my husband meant when he said something. Right? We've got to get the hay in, because otherwise we're not going to be able to feed the cows, and then we're going to die. So I've got all of these physical imperatives that my survival is predicated upon. Mm-hmm. We don't have time to just sit here and chat about these pretty things. So my grandma, who I just mentioned, when my dad was little, my grandma had to carry water uphill in order to bathe him or wash her dishes, like 2 blocks uphill. They did not have running water in her home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's my great-grandparents, same thing, outhouse, the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, they're sleeping really well.
Yeah, because they're working their butts off all day physically, physical exhaustion. But I think what the messages that I feel like I was given, and maybe you too, is that, to stop and feel and then cry or anything, it could affect your survival.
I think that's absolutely right. We literally don't have time for this in an agrarian economy.
Right. And in you and I, when we felt emotion, we used food, and thank God food was there for us.
Absolutely.
At least for me, I thank God food was there to help me get through the emotions that I didn't have any other way to process or get through.
You know what? I realized this relatively recently. When I was in either 7th or 8th grade, I tried to break my own arm so that I wouldn't have to go to school. And I know it breaks my heart. I rode a skateboard into a wall time and time again, trying to break my own arm so I didn't have to go to school. And I just say that to say I discovered alcohol really soon after that. So I was looking for a way to not feel these things that were that painful,
Yeah. Which are really self-destructive.
100%.
Really oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, let's spend a minute talking about alcohol, and then I'd like to talk to you about, kind of December 2022. We'll kind of talk about that. But yeah, I got sober June 1st, 2012. You've been sober for 25 years.
Yeah.
And I think you said that you went through alcohol rehab. So you lost weight when you got sober. I gained weight because I started using food really in a big way. So I switched seats on the Titanic. I was going down. I was just going to be using something else.
Absolutely.
So I went up to 203 after I got sober, and it helped me. Food helped me get sober.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's what happened to me. The food or the alcohol had calories, sure, but I was replacing that with food and more just to get sober, and it worked. So talk about your alcohol use.
Absolutely. I started using alcohol for fun, like most people do. And the end of my drinking, I was at that time finishing my PhD, and I was literally going home. I was directing plays at that time. So I would be at the theater from say 7 to 10 or 11. I would go home and write my dissertation while listening to ABBA and drinking. And I listened to ABBA Gold over and over. Yeah, it's because
Wow.
it's good typing music. Change your mind.
It's got a good beat for typing, sure.
Yeah. So, but I was just kind of high level anxiety all the time.
Yeah.
And I just felt as though, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. So I'm doing anything that I can. At that time, I was eating and drinking with both hands. I reached my top known weight is in the 260s, but
260.
Yeah, let's say 265. So however, I believe I probably weighed a little more. So I've got these pictures of myself where I'm just bloated, and I'm really glad that I didn't throw those away because they are valuable to me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what the end of my drinking was. I was not drinking to have fun. I was drinking to numb the pain. I just wanted to stop the monkey mind that was saying, we're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. I did the exact same thing, and I used to call it the beehive in my chest, the anxiety.
Absolutely.
Just like, I just need to calm this down, and I did it through food and alcohol. And we're going to talk about recovery in the time we have left. December 2022 was pivotal for you. And I'd like you to talk about that. I thought probably one of the most interesting things you said was that, you'd been in other recovery programs, you'd had other food plans, you've kind of experimented like I have over many years, but I think we found a solution. You were trying to control your sugar intake. And of course, we know we can't do that. We have to abstain from sugar. Otherwise, we're going to have cravings. And so talk about that.
So the last hurrah, I had in fall of 2022, I had gone back to Weight Watchers because I had some historical romance with Weight Watchers.
Yeah.
I had gained.
They lure you back. They got Oprah now,
Absolutely. So I had gone back to Weight Watchers. And the thing about Weight Watchers is they're a moderation-based plan. So you can have a little bit of this. And so I thought, well, I too can have a little bit of this. So I was the only person at Weight Watchers who was following the plan and gaining weight. So
I did that.
It was great. I'm eating the approved. I'm within my points. Why am I gaining weight? Because I'm eating. I'm eating stuff that I can't eat. So I was in a bunch of pain. I get, this compulsion. I just get it in my head. We had talked earlier about how my husband has food in the house. It doesn't talk to him. Apparently, he doesn't have to go eat it in the middle of the night. I don't have that experience. So I was in a lot of that psychic pain, and I had been in food programs before where I had felt a sense of release around food. I'd been able to enjoy and control my eating. And so in December of 2022, I was asking a power that, I don't know what it is, but just kind of going, please help me. And I woke up.
I call it God.
Right. Yeah. Well, but
God, higher power, some spiritual intervention, whatever.
Yeah, I use the word God, but I don't want anybody to think I know what that means. So
it's out there. It's loose, but we do have to have. We're powerless over it, so we have to have something, right?
So I woke up on December 31st of 2022 and knew that if I went to a 12-step program, I would be able to have relief. And it was just, as though information had been planted in my brain. And I thought, I got to do this right now. So I went to the Google machine and plugged it in. And there was a meeting, a Zoom meeting that was about to start. And on that meeting, there were people who were obviously really thrilled with life.
Yeah.
Like, what is
happening? Like happy and laughing and everything.
They were happy. They were laughing. They looked to be at a normal weight. They talked about, and they talked really specifically about what they did. They weren't, it wasn't mysterious. They weren't trying to lure me in. So I hung out after the meeting and talked to some people. And I've been abstinent since January 1 of 2023. And that's a big deal for
Yeah.
a compulsive eater like me.
Yeah. I've been abstinent since January 6, 2017. I've released and maintained a 70-pound weight loss.
Yeah.
I get to live, I was
Right.
killing myself with food. I had high blood pressure, diabetes, the whole thing. And this is the only thing that worked for me, and that is recovery,
Yeah.
12-step recovery. And that's what you're talking about. But once we realize that we cannot control, we can't stop from starting, and we can't stop once we start with sugar and trigger foods, right? And that's the whole thing. We have to release that and surrender to it.
Absolutely.
Right? We have to surrender to it. Then we have to get to work.
Absolutely.
And that's what we do every day. So talk about what you're doing today to stay abstinent from sugar, highly processed foods. What's your food plan look like? And then we'll talk about the spiritual part.
Sure. My food plan is a lot of unprocessed foods,
Yeah. Whole foods.
Yeah, whole foods. I eat a lot of protein. I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat a lot of fruit. And I eat
fats. Fats are important.
I eat fats, and they're fantastic. One of the things that I have heard to be true is that my food that I eat today is much more delicious than my gas station binge food. You could not have convinced me that I would that I would be okay with saying I don't want to have Girl Scout Thin Mints and a tub of buttered popcorn.
Who knew you could get excited about Brussels sprouts?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. That didn't seem, but I can today. The food that I eat is fantastic. Also, we had talked about the emotional component. I look daily. I do a daily inventory where I look at what's really going on. Where am I resentful? Where is self showing up? Where are you making me mad?
Yeah.
And so I have the opportunity to deal with that stuff when it comes up before it becomes a big deal. And all of a sudden I'm crying in the green bean aisle at Kroger, and I don't know why. By the way, if you've never cried in a public space, let me just tell you this. It's fantastic because everybody will give you a wide berth.
They want you to be any part of that. No. People like your grandma, like, she's crying. We have to abort.
Oh my gosh. Right. Yeah.
But you're like me in the emotion category. I mean, we spent so much of our time avoiding feeling and not processing this stuff using food and alcohol that in this program, in a 12-step program, you have to face this stuff. I didn't know what I was feeling. I had to pull out a list of emotions and saying, yes, I'm mad.
Right.
Yes, I'm sad. Yes, I'm fearful. And then you have to work at it. And it's not as easy sometimes as eating or drinking, but it's necessary.
I had a friend who would describe it as we're grooving new neural pathways. And I really loved that because to a certain extent, it is like I am writing with my non-dominant hand. I have to really think about it, but it gets easier and more legible the longer I do it.
Yeah, I say to people, it's like having your shoes on the wrong feet for a while.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It feels really weird, but eventually you put them back on the right feet and they feel better. But these are new habits. But we have to realize that food and sugar is an addiction. As much as we'd like to keep eating it, we have to face that. We become abstinent. We weigh and measure our food, don't we? And we have a food plan that involves, I have some carbs. I have rice and potatoes I can eat. I have fats. I mean, these fats are important for your body's health.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you have to have a spiritual component, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be God. But you do have to realize that you couldn't do this on your own. If you and I could do this on our own, we would have done it back in 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
And we couldn't. And we experimented. We got in late, but we're here. And that's the beautiful thing. So anything else you'd like to say about your program?
I'm really grateful for the fact that today I don't have to feel guilt or shame about the fact that I didn't find it earlier or that I wasn't able to stay abstinent the first time I got abstinent. I don't have to beat myself up about any of that today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't. And I don't beat myself up because I don't eat like my husband.
Right.
That he keeps a piece of dark chocolate in the cupboard for like a month and he eats like a little square every night, and it's like, good for you, This is what I have to do to stay away from it because I know I'll keep eating it and buy more and all of that. So as we wrap up here, I have kind of a signature question I ask people, and that is if someone's listening to this that thinks he or she might be a food addict, let's say they're carrying 125 pounds, 150 pounds, or even 30 pounds, and they can't stop eating certain foods, and they're miserable, and they've tried diets, what would you say to them? Him, or her?
I would say that there is recovery that's available in 12-step rooms that's free and accessible. One of the fantastic things that happened during COVID was the proliferation of Zoom meetings, for instance.
Yes.
So, if you live in an area, for instance, where there are not face-to-face meetings, there are phone meetings or Zoom meetings.
Yes.
And there are websites that'll talk to you about what specifically you can do. You don't have to do this alone. And that's what I would say.
And these programs are listed on infactschool.com. Resources, partners, these programs are listed there. If anybody wants to check them out, infactschool.com. So, recovery is possible. There is a solution for us who have tried a lot of things and who are smarter than our own good. Feel our feelings now and know that it's okay. We're not going to die. We're not going to die from these feelings. So
absolutely.
Hey, Amy, thanks for joining me today. It's been great. I think it'll be a great episode.
Thanks for having me.
This is the Food Addiction Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the podcast and learned more about this disease. We hope you will rate and write a review on this podcast and share it with others. If you or someone you know is suffering from the disease of food addiction, there is a solution. The various food addiction recovery programs are available and listed on the website, theinfactschool.com. Or if you would like to know more about how to get certified in treating food addiction, the school is accepting applications now for its next training beginning in September 2023. Go to theinfactschool.com. That's INFACT school.com to learn more.